Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to this afternoon's stream. This afternoon for me, of course, on a, well, I won't say warm, but decent day weather-wise in my part of the UK, the end of September. It's amazing that it's already the end of September. It felt like it was only, 3-4 weeks ago to me, that it was start of summer. To be honest, it's flown by so quickly, but we are here today to cover some more topics, obviously, from the world of Formula 1. I'll get into what the topics are officially for this stream in just a moment. Just want to say hello to you guys. I hope you're all doing well. Hope you've been keeping well since the last Grand Prix at Monza, and even since the last stream I did, which was last Sunday. If you were unable to check that out, though, and I haven't seen you since, say, the Italian Grand Prix, then yeah, I hope you're all doing well. And no matter what time time zone you're living in or what part of the world you're from, I'm hoping you all are having a good time at the minute, and no matter the circumstances, I'm hoping you're all doing okay. By the way, just saw a comment from William in the live chat saying I'll try and check out as much as I can, but I'll probably listen to the rest later, Chaz. No problem with that. And yeah, if anyone else is unable to because of the time zone that they're living in or in, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, great to see you all here for this stream. And I've had a pretty nerve-wracking / exciting week. I did my first 2 days at university this week on Tuesday and Wednesday. Again, reminder, I'm not actually attending university in person. I'm actually attending a local college where I can do the work with a load of other students taking the same lesson, and I'm doing film media and photography. And yeah, it's been a good week so far. Still going through the induction period, just getting introduced to what we're going to be doing for at least the first half of the year, going up until the middle of January, something like that. Yeah, it was nerve-wracking, definitely, and knackering, especially mentally. The amount of mental energy that I had to put into those 2 days was, very, very tiring indeed. But yeah, it was a good week, and I am very excited, obviously, for the rest of the course. The only problem, I'll have to check my emails later after this stream, is I'm not sure next week I'll actually be able to go in, because I think the university and college, is it lecturers or staff, I think are going on strike starting next week, and I think at the college that I attend, they might be on strike, so that's a shame, but I do support, obviously, the reason they're striking and all of that. But yeah, it's been a good week for me. Good last couple of weeks, really, where I've, started this new journey, and hopefully I will be able to, as I obviously do week by week with this course, hopefully I'll be able to improve the channel from whatever I learn on that course as well. But that's what I've been up to in the last week or so. And yeah, we'll see how I do with that as the year goes on. But let me get into... Instead of that, let's get into what we're actually talking about today in this stream. So, the main topic is me predicting the future of Formula 1. Now, I was going to do the drivers and teams, but in setting this stream up, I didn't have the time to be able to include the teams. I will probably... Well, I'm not going to say probably. I might do a separate video on the teams at a later point. We'll see. It depends really on how this, topic goes, and if it turns out to be one that you guys like. So what I'm going to stick to in today's stream is predicting the future of Formula 1 for the drivers only, which, to be honest, I think I think you guys are more so interested in than the teams themselves. And it will cause definitely more debate, because, I have wrote down notes for the teams and how I think they'll do between now and the end of the decade. And to be honest, it's not massively different from how they're performing now. So it wouldn't exactly be a groundbreaking video with amazing predictions. The predictions I'm going to get into in a moment with the drivers, a couple of the predictions, certainly with the top drivers, I don't think you guys will be surprised by, but there will be some surprises with others for sure that I think you guys will turn your eyes at. So yeah, we'll see what you guys think of that. But what I'm, again, going to do is I'm just going to predict the future of Formula 1 in regards to the drivers. And the time period I'm predicting is from the start of next season, 2023, until the end of 2029. That is the time period we are focusing on. So when I get into that topic, which, by the way, I am going to be recording, because it is going to be uploaded as a video probably after the double header coming up in Singapore and Japan is when I'm going to upload this video. Make sure in the live chat, as I'm going along, let me know for the respective drivers that I go through, you know, your Verstappen's, Perez's, Leclerc, Sainz, Hamilton, Russell, Norris, Alonso, Ocon, Ricciardo, Piastri, all those drivers. Let me know as I go along what you think will happen with all those drivers in the next, 6-7 years, basically, in Formula 1. And give me your predictions as to those drivers. And let me know whether you agree or disagree with what I have to say. Because I really want to know whether you guys agree or disagree or not. So that is what we'll be getting into. And I will, for the top drivers, not all of the top drivers, but for, I think, Max, Leclerc, Sainz, Hamilton, Russell, I will be providing some stats, I guess you could say, on screen. And obviously it's not stats that are recorded in history. It's stats that, or it's like a graphic that shows my prediction in, like, you know, text form. We'll get into it, obviously, when I get into the actual topic itself. But yeah, for the top drivers, I'll be able to display clearly, at least on screen, what my predictions are for the certain drivers. So that is the main topic of today's stream. Then, and I will probably mention the teams as well, just to say that. I will probably mention the teams and how I think they will fare during the rest of the decade as well, as we go through some of the main drivers for some of those teams. Say, when we get into, when we get into Verstappen, I will, you know, mention how I think Red Bull will be like, or how they will be in the next few years. Same with Ferrari when it comes to me talking about Charles Leclerc. Same with Mercedes when I start talking about, you know, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. Same with Norris and McLaren. So I will mention, in a way, how I think the teams will do over the next few years as well. But yeah, that is, again, predicting the future of Formula 1 on the driver's side. That is the main topic of today's stream. And then, after that, and after I've gone through your comments in the chat, that, you know, are responding to what I have said or giving your own predictions, I will get into some news such as the 2023 F1 calendar reveal. We'll get into that, and also get into the news about Colton Herta being denied a FIA super license, and a health update on Alex Albon that happened. The update on Twitter or social media happened about a couple of weeks ago, but we'll get more so into that in case you guys don't know what happened. And we'll also get into a couple confirmations from a couple teams as to who may or may not be driving for them in 2023. So we'll get into that as well. And yeah, that is the plan for this stream. And I hope you guys obviously enjoy. And yeah, I'm going to quickly, in a moment, have a quick drink just to make sure my throat's in decent condition. But like I said, let me know as I go on, as I talk about the certain drivers and work my way from top all the way down to, you know, near the back of the grid. Let me know, for all of the drivers that I go through, who you think or how you think their careers will go between now and the end of the 2020s decade. Again, the time period we are covering is from the beginning of 2023 until the end of 2029. Let me know what you think will happen for the drivers' careers, again, that I'll get into in a moment. But again, I'm going to quickly have a drink, and then we will get into the topic itself. And again, I will be recording it because it will come out as a recorded video probably in 2.5 weeks from now, something like that. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. But let me just quickly mute my microphone, and then we'll get straight into it. Right, that is a lot better for my throat. I will say, one thing I have noticed when I come back to streaming, because obviously when the season is properly going, we've got double headers, triple headers. In terms of my ability to speak clearly and commentate and do these streams as best as I can from a commentary point of view, I guess you could say. Yeah, when there's races actually happening, it's in good condition. But one thing I've noticed is when we have like this type of break where there's like a couple weeks between races or even 3 weeks, yeah, when I come back on stream, I do stutter and have a quite sore throat as well from the little break we have. So yeah, just remarking on that, because I know as soon as I started speaking on today's stream, my throat was already seizing up because I just haven't done this. It feels like that much in the last 2 weeks. I mean, it's 2 weeks, I think, exactly since the Italian, or the finish of the Italian Grand Prix, which actually feels a bit longer, to be honest, since that Italian Grand Prix. But there you go. But yeah, let's, I think, in just a moment, get into this topic. And yeah, we're going to go, I'm going to quickly just say this. We're going to go through the Red Bull drivers first, then the Ferrari drivers, then the Mercedes drivers, and then the McLaren drivers, Piastri, the current Alpine drivers, and then after that, we won't go through every driver on the grid because, you know, I don't think you guys really care about the, you know, predicting the future of Kevin Magnussen or Nicholas Latifi or even Yuki Tsunoda. No disrespect to those drivers, or even, I guess you could say, Alexander Albon as well. So yeah, we're going to go through every driver from the top 5 teams, and then after that, we will get into... let me just check how many after that we're going to get into. It'll be, yeah, about 3 other drivers after that. So in total, the drivers we're going to be predicting their futures will be, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 14 drivers in total we'll be predicting in terms of their futures. Again, we're not going to go through every driver because not every driver is really going to have an exciting or even that interesting of a future, to be honest. So yeah, but I think we will just get into it. So guys, here we are, and what we are going to do today is, as it says on the title of this video, we are going to predict the future of the current Formula 1 grid between the start of 2023 until the end of 2029. Again, I am not going to, as it says in the description of this video, I am not going to go through every single driver on the grid. It's going to be most of the grid that I go through, and also a driver that will be on the grid next season I will mention as to his future in Formula 1. So that's what we're going to be getting into in today's video. And of course, we will start at the very front of the field and start with the man who is about to win his 2nd Drivers' World Championship. And that is, of course, Max Verstappen. Now, given how this new set of regulations, this new era of 2022 has begun, with Red Bull and Ferrari clearly having the 2 best cars, and Red Bull being the best team in Formula 1, because not only do they have a car quick enough to win a championship, but obviously operationally they are much better than Ferrari. Red Bull will be the team to beat between now and the start of 2026. So Max Verstappen, in my view, will have, by the end of 2025, probably 2 more championships, which will make him a 4-time world champion by the end of 2025. Of course, he's going to win the championship this year. By the time this video has been released, this is being recorded before the Singapore Grand Prix, but by the time this has been released, he has, I'm guessing, won his 2nd world championship. So, yep, he'll be a 4-time world champion at the end of 2025. After 2026, though, it is going to get a little bit more difficult for Max Verstappen. The reason is because Red Bull, at the moment, don't actually absolutely know what their plan is engine-wise from 2026 on. Will they partner back up with Honda? Will they build their own power units? Will they maybe do a deal with Porsche? We don't know yet. Or, actually not Porsche, maybe Audi. We don't know. We don't know what their official plan is when it comes to the 2026 regs and what power units they're going to have. And I think that will cause them to be not as dominant and not as great after 2026. And I think we'll see certain other team, Mercedes, bounce back in 2026 with those new regs, because we know with new engine regs, Mercedes do tend to do pretty well, as we know from the past. And I think Mercedes, even in this current era, will bounce back. So after 2026, things will get more difficult, but I do think he'll win another world championship between 2026 and the end of the decade. Of course, his contract at Red Bull ends at the end of 2028, which is pretty much at the end of this decade. So Max Verstappen, in my view, will be the best driver in this decade and clearly the driver to beat. As I'll get into in a few moments' time, Lewis Hamilton, even though he is still right on at least Max Verstappen's level right now, still for me, Lewis Hamilton is the absolute best driver on the grid. Max is going to be, for the future, the one to beat. There is no doubt about that. And again, for the next 2 or 3 years, definitely Red Bull are going to be very hard to stop. And there's only one team that can stop them, which is Mercedes-Benz. But let me get into this graphic, which displays how I think, or what position Verstappen will be in at the end of the 2020s decade. So, in 2029, he will be a 5-time Drivers' World Champion, in my view. He will stay at Red Bull for the entire decade. Even when he gets to 2028, I think he'll probably just sign a new contract. I don't see Max Verstappen driving for another team, to be honest. The only other team I can see him joining is Mercedes at the end of his contract, again, in 2028. And by the end of this decade, he will have 75 to 80 race wins. That's an approximate. I'm not going to sit here and try and predict an exact number because that would be crazy to do. But I think he'll have around 75 to 80 race wins. At the moment, has about 31. And again, I'm recording this before the Singapore Grand Prix. And we'll have about 35 to 40 pole positions by the end of this decade as well. And what this will mean, if he does end the decade in this position, he will be able then to go into the 2030s. And in 2030, I think he'll be... How old will he be? 32, 33, something like that. So he'll probably have, if he still wants to keep going to break, Lewis Hamilton's records, he would probably have a good, 5-6 years left, with Verstappen at least. He will then be in a very good place to then become, statistically, the greatest driver of all time. Of course, that is a long way away, Max Verstappen getting into that position, but he will definitely be, by the end of this decade, already one of the greatest drivers of all time. Not the greatest, but in that top 4 or 5 drivers. There is no doubt about it. To be honest, at the end of this year, you could argue Verstappen is already in the top at least 15 best of all time, arguably top 10 greatest drivers of all time, given that we know he is going to go on and win more world titles. So Max Verstappen, again, is the man to beat, and that's how I think he will do for the rest of this decade. But what about his teammate, Sergio Perez? Well, for Sergio Perez, we know at Red Bull that he is in a similar position to Valtteri Bottas when he was at Mercedes, or Rubens Barrichello when he was at Ferrari, or even You could say David Coulthard when he was at McLaren and teammates with Mika Hakkinen. He is the loyal number 2 driver, basically, of the Red Bull team, and is, very consistent for Red Bull, very dependable for the Red Bull team. And I don't see, as long as Red Bull keep winning titles, which they will, at least for the next 3 to 4 years, I don't see Sergio Perez going anywhere. And my prediction for Perez is that he will keep racing for Red Bull until the end of 2026, or at least around that time. And then he will leave and probably finish his career at a smaller team, say a Williams or a Haas F1, maybe an Alfa Romeo that will become Sauber by that point. We'll see. But that's how I think Sergio's rest of his career will go. And at Red Bull for the next few years, he will probably collect 3 or 4 more race wins, a load more podiums, and go down as a very liked and great member of this team. No doubt about that. But now, let's get into the current Ferrari drivers and how I think the future of their careers will go. So we'll go on to Charles Leclerc, who we know currently is in a position of where at Ferrari, he's doing a great job in terms of his own driving, but the team, as they've done to Sebastian Vettel in the past, Fernando Alonso in the past, arguably you could say Kimi Raikkonen after Raikkonen's first world title win in his first stint at Ferrari. No matter how well those drivers, including Leclerc, have done at the Ferrari team, Leclerc just cannot overcome the amount of mistakes, the costly mistakes that Ferrari are making, which is ruining any chances that Charles Leclerc can have of winning a world championship. And as I have talked about in a previous video, which should be linked below in the description, Charles Leclerc is never going to win a championship at Ferrari. He needs to leave Ferrari if he is going to win a world title. And his contract, we know, ends at the end of 2024. And I think by then, Ferrari will, keep making these silly mistakes we've seen. They'll keep costing him race wins and good results. And if the Ferrari car is still as quick as it has been this season, they'll probably still keep costing him chances at winning a maiden world title. And by the end of 2024, I think Leclerc will be pretty much sick of being at this team and having so many chances thrown away by his team and being handicapped by his own team. And this is what I think will happen for Leclerc for the rest of the decade once he does leave Ferrari. So I think he will join the Mercedes team for 2025. As I'll get into in a moment with Lewis Hamilton, I think Lewis Hamilton will be leaving the Mercedes team and retiring before Charles Leclerc's contract does come to an end at Ferrari. And like I said, I think he'll join Mercedes in 2025 to partner George Russell. And then in 2026, I think Charles Leclerc will win his first driver's title. Even if he doesn't win it in that year, though, I think Leclerc will win. If he does join Mercedes, I think he will win a driver's title with them. And I do think Mercedes, for sure, will return to being a front-running, title-contending team. Just not as strong as they were between 2014 and 2021. I don't think Mercedes will ever be as strong as they were during that time period ever again. I don't think that's going to happen. But like I said, I think he'll join Mercedes in 2025 and then win his first driver's title the year after. And then by the end of the decade, I think he'll have about 25 race wins and end up with about 40 to 45 pole positions in total by the end of the decade. I think Leclerc at the moment has 5 race wins, again, before the Singapore Grand Prix. So another 20 wins between now and the end of the decade, I think seems pretty realistic in predicting that. And if he wants to win a world championship, Leclerc, that career path of joining Mercedes when his contract ends, if of course there is a seat available, that is the path he needs to take. Because if he does not join Mercedes, obviously he's not going to go to Red Bull because that is Max's team. he will not win a world title. It's not going to happen. Ferrari are not going to win a world championship in this decade. It's not going to happen. They will have chances to win championships. I don't think they're going to be like a midfield team or anything like that. They'll probably have another 3 or 4 chances to win a championship, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, Ferrari are not going to be winning world titles, which is why Leclerc will have to leave Ferrari to win at least one world title in his career. What about his teammate, though, Carlos Sainz? Well, Carlos, at Ferrari right now, not being treated as a number 2 driver, but let's be honest, he is number 2 to Leclerc in terms of talent and skill and just raw pace at Ferrari currently. And I reckon as well he will, because he's now contracted to the Ferrari team until the end of 2024, I believe by then he'll be fed up of the Ferrari team as well, because I don't see Ferrari going really forward massively between now and when his contract ends at the end of 2024. And I don't think Sainz will be really that keen by that point to continue being second fiddle to Charles Leclerc. So I think Carlos Sainz will, after collecting probably another 3 or 4 race wins, I reckon he'll get in his career. Obviously, he's only won 1 race to date, again, before the Singapore Grand Prix, at the British Grand Prix, as you can see on your screen at the minute. But I do think he will collect probably another 3, 4, maybe 5 at most race wins, probably another couple pole positions and a load more podiums. But I think he will want to be more so the number 1, kind of like Daniel Ricciardo wanted to be when he left Red Bull at the end of 2018 and joined Renault, wanted to be more so the main focus at that team. That's what I think Carlos Sainz will want when, leaving Ferrari at the end of 2024. And this is how I think the rest of his career will go after that point. So, he will not feature in a World Drivers' Championship battle in this decade. I do need to make sure to point that out. And the reason is because, as I got into in a previous video, which you can check out on the channel, and it's a video about why Carlos Sainz just isn't an elite F1 driver, I don't see Carlos Sainz, unless he's the number 1 driver in a car that is the best on the grid, I don't see how Carlos Sainz wins a world championship or can consistently compete with the top drivers throughout the season. We've seen this season. He just cannot consistently fight with those drivers in every Grand Prix, or in 95% of Grand Prix, and I think he will end up just not being good enough to be in a world title fight for the rest of the decade, no matter what car really he is in, unless, like I said, he's in the best car on the grid and happens to be the best driver in that particular team. And like I said a few moments ago, he'll leave Ferrari when his contract ends, and I believe he will join Aston Martin for 2025, replacing Fernando Alonso, who I'll get into later, who I think at the end of 2024, which is when his contract, I think, is until. I know Alonso does have the option for a 3rd year, which would take him into 2025, but I think Alonso will actually retire from Formula 1 at the end of 2024, and that will lead to them replacing Alonso with Carlos Sainz. Aston Martin, though, I do believe will start to progressively, now that they've got some people acquired, obviously, from the Red Bull team and some other top teams as well, Aston Martin will start to get better, and I reckon by the end of this decade, Aston Martin will be at least a front-running team and will be a contender to a certain extent. So that's why I think Carlos Sainz will move from Ferrari to Aston Martin, and I think he'll do pretty well at Aston Martin and have a decent career with them. So that's what I see for Carlos Sainz going forward for the rest of the decade. Now, let's get on to the Mercedes drivers, and we'll start with Lewis Hamilton. And I'm going to keep it pretty simple when it comes to Lewis Hamilton. I think he will retire at the end of next season. Not because he's, demotivated or just isn't good enough anymore. Obviously, he is easily good enough and is still, for me, the best driver on the grid. If only he had a car that could properly compete with the other top drivers in Formula 1 right now, such as Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, who are in much faster cars on a consistent basis. But what I think will happen next year is Mercedes will bounce back and be title contenders next year, and Lewis Hamilton will get his revenge for 2021 and win an 8th World Championship, and then I think retire from the sport, because I think Lewis is the type of driver to retire on top, and I think that would be actually the best way for him to retire from Formula 1, to retire on top and go out absolutely, without a doubt, statistically or opinion-wise, as the greatest driver of all time. We'll get into how I think here with this graphic, just how I think it'll play out. So yeah, he'll win his 8th world title in 2023, then retire from F1, will go down as the GOAT statistically, and I think will retire with around 115 race wins and around 110 pole positions and 8 world titles. And yeah, as well, not only do I think he's the type of driver or type of person to retire on top, but also, if he was next year to win his 8th World Championship, why, in my view, why would you continue at that point? Because, I mean, he's, what, 37, 38 almost? I'm not sure of his exact age, but he is nearly 40 years old. And if he was to win his 8th world title next year, there's not anything else to accomplish. I mean, yeah, you could build some ground on the people behind you in the record books to make sure that your records last even longer. But, if you win that 8th world title, if you're Lewis Hamilton, I just don't see what else there would be to accomplish. And I think he would have pretty much, as a driver, completed Formula 1. So that's why I think he will retire at the end of 2023 with his 8th world title. And I have to just say, before anyone says anything, that I don't want him to retire at the end of 2023. I want him to keep going for years. I know he has said that he wants to keep going for years, but if he was to win an 8th World Championship next season, I think his opinions on that might change. But yeah, I don't hope that he retires next year. I don't hope that at all. I want him to be on the grid for as long as he wants, because Lewis Hamilton being on a Formula 1 grid would be absolutely fantastic for Formula 1 and for the entertainment of Formula 1 going forward as well. But that's what I think is going to happen. We'll see if I am correct or not. But what about his teammate at the time, George Russell? Well, in with Lewis Hamilton retiring, in my view, and winning that 8th world title at the end of 2023, Russell, from that point on, going into 2024 and beyond, will now be the clear number 1 at Mercedes. Well, not the clear number 1, but he will be I guess you could say, the team leader. Even though I do think Charles Leclerc will join Mercedes in 2025, I still think Russell will be the team leader, even though Russell and Leclerc in 2025 will be of equal standing within the team in terms of driver status. There's obviously not going to be a number 1, number 2 driver type status within that team. Kind of like at the minute with Hamilton and Russell, they both have equal status, but Lewis Hamilton is the team leader because he's been there longer out of the 2 drivers. I think that's how it will work with those 2. And in regards quickly to who will replace Lewis Hamilton for 2024, I think that will be, again, a temporary replacement, because I don't think that Toto Wolff will want to or will be able to find an instant replacement that is anywhere near the quality of Lewis Hamilton. I think it'll probably be Nick de Vries for a year replacing Lewis Hamilton, and then once Leclerc's contract comes to an end, or Lando Norris's contract comes to an end, which I know is in, I think, end of 2025, then I think that's when they would go for those type of drivers who would be able to get a lot closer to what they would have lost with Lewis Hamilton. Again, though, that is if Hamilton does retire at the end of 2023, like I think he will. But going forward, after 2023, I think George Russell will be Max Verstappen's main challenger or contender for the rest of the decade. In my view, let's say Lewis Hamilton is not on the grid. I think Russell, I don't think he's the best driver on the grid if on the Formula One grid if there's no Lewis Hamilton. I still think it would be Max Verstappen, but I think he would be out of, say, himself, Leclerc, Norris, Sainz, whatever drivers behind, Piastri. I think George Russell is the best driver out of those group in terms of his talent, skill, and pace. I think he's the best driver that can challenge Max. Obviously, it does depend on whether the car is good enough, but I think he will be Max's main challenger for 2024, 2025, and then I think Mercedes will properly bounce back with the 2026 regs, which, to be honest, I think they'll probably start focusing on pretty soon, given that the current power units in terms of their development have been frozen. So give some time to focus a bit on 2026 as those regs will fly around quite soon enough. But let me get into this graphic just showing how I think Russell and the rest of the decade will go for him. So I think he will win 2 drivers' titles in both 2027 and 2029, respectively. Again, with the new 2026 regs, I think Mercedes will more so bounce back then. Like I said, with Lewis Hamilton, I think they will bounce back next year in being, title contenders and front-running, race-winning contenders on a consistent basis again. But I think they'll be more stronger after 2026 than they are going to be in this current era before we get to those new regs in 2026. So I think he'll win 2 drivers' titles and have 2 titles by the end of this decade. And like it says there, I think he'll be Max Verstappen's main challenger from 2024 onwards. And I think he'll also remain at Mercedes for the rest of the decade and end up with 35 to 40 wins by the end of the decade as well. Obviously, at the moment, doesn't have any race wins. But yeah, by the end of this decade, I think he'll have quite a lot of wins. And to be honest, I think Russell will probably end his career as the second, third best British driver of all time. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton is probably always going to be the best British driver of all time. I don't think there's going to be many contenders ever for that status, but I think Russell could definitely go down as the second or third greatest British driver of all time. The talent, skill, pace, all of it is absolutely there for Russell, and if the car is at a world title contending level, which I think it will be from next year on, really for the rest of the decade, with Mercedes getting stronger again from 2026 on, then look out for George Russell, because I definitely think he will be a world champion. He has, I think, everything you need to be a world champion. Just doesn't have, at the moment, the car in 2022, and also his teammate is the greatest driver of all time, which is pretty hard competition. Lewis Hamilton hasn't exactly got worse, has he, in 2022. So yeah, look out for Russell in the next few years. But those are the top drivers from the top teams. Let's now get into some of the midfield teams and the drivers currently occupying those seats. We'll start with Lando Norris. I did say in an earlier video, I think the video I did about Lando Norris having the career that many don't think he'll have, that I think he'll have, if that makes any sense. I'll post the video in the description of this video, don't worry about that. But I kind of already alluded to the future of Lando Norris, at least for the next decade. I think he will stay at McLaren until the end of the decade. The reason is because by 2025, when his contract comes to an end, I don't think there'll be anywhere for him to go unless a new team, a new top team, suddenly appears that isn't Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull, which I don't think is massively likely, to be honest. And I think he'll stay at McLaren, probably sign another 3 to 4 year contract, and then be with them at least until the end of the decade. And what he will basically be is a driver that wins maybe a race or two, collects a load more podiums, but ultimately just doesn't feature consistently at the front of Formula One races. Not because he's not good enough. He's definitely good enough. He's already proven that. But because the McLaren team, in my view, will not be a proper front-running, title-contending team in this decade. I just don't see it happening. Now, I know I could be wrong because McLaren, they're building, I think, a new wind tunnel, and they are investing more in, some very important resources. I get that, and they definitely should improve on where they are now. But at the moment, we're seeing that they're already underperforming, given what resources they have currently. This year has been a bit of a disappointment, really, for McLaren, because they haven't really took that step forward that they really should have from last year, where I think last year was about the peak of what they could have done in that last little era of F1. But yeah, I just don't think McLaren will ever be, in this decade, a front-running, title-contending team. So that's what I think will happen with Lando Norris. It's a shame, but if he can find another team that can win championships that isn't Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull, then I think he's definitely got a good chance in the future. But what about his teammate for next year, Oscar Piastri? Oscar Piastri, obviously, he's joining McLaren for next year, and his contract is until the end of 2024. What I think will happen firstly with McLaren is, I think the first season at McLaren next year, I think he'll do a decent job. He won't be as good as Norris next year because Norris is already comfortable on that team. It'll be Piastri's obviously debut year, and Piastri, I don't think, except for the simulator, has really driven these cars. So yeah, it's going to be a tough year next year. But I reckon by 2024, I think we'll see him with Oscar Piastri. I think he will, with McLaren. I think he will, sorry, my stream at the minute that I'm recording this video on is messing up quite a bit. Sorry about that. Yeah, Piastri for McLaren, what I think will happen is he will be kind of like with Carlos Sainz in 2020. I think Piastri will be pretty much on the same pace as Norris. Maybe not as good as Sainz was in that year in 2020 with McLaren. Obviously 2019 as well compared to Norris. But I think Oscar will be at a point by the end of 2024 where he will need to really join another team to really progress, because like I said, I don't think McLaren are really going to be going forward in the next few years. And I think if he really wants Piastri to become a front-running driver and compete for race wins and podiums and that lot, I think he'll have to leave McLaren. And that's what I think he'll do. I think at the end of 2024, after a good couple years at McLaren, I think he will leave them. And because, like I said earlier, I think Leclerc and Sainz will leave Ferrari, I think Oscar Piastri will join Ferrari. And I think he'll race for them and be their probably number one driver for 2025 onwards. That's what I think he'll be, or where he'll be going from that point onwards. And I think he'll then become a front-running driver. He'll be competing for wins, podiums, maybe in a certain couple years, he'll be competing for world championships, but because it's Ferrari, he won't win a world championship no matter how well he does. So that's what I think will happen with Oscar Piastri in terms of his next few years. And to be honest, as a career path, that would be a pretty good one, going from McLaren to Ferrari. And yeah, that's how I think it will go. Him getting to a point with McLaren where he's pretty much on equal pace of Norris, and maybe not as good as Norris, but very, very close to him. And I think we'll then want to break away and go to another team where he can be the number one driver. And if Ferrari were to lose Leclerc and Sainz at the end of 2024, then I think going to Ferrari would be probably the best option quite clearly for him. But let's get into the man he's replacing at McLaren for what do you call it, for 2023, Daniel Ricciardo. Now, in me trying to come up with my predictions for the drivers, it was very hard to determine what I thought was going to happen with Ricciardo. He's not going to be on the grid next year. I don't believe that is going to happen at all, unless it's been announced that he's going to be joining the Haas team or the Williams team or something like that. Again, obviously recording this before the Singapore Grand Prix. I think Ricciardo will probably be off the grid in 2023. And to be honest, I don't think we're going to see Ricciardo again after this year in Formula 1. I think he'll probably go to IndyCar. The only chance I see is in 2024, him joining, say, the Haas team. Maybe the Sauber team, but that does depend probably on where Valtteri Bottas is at that time and whether Valtteri Bottas wants to stay with what would then become, Alfa Romeo to Sauber for 2024. Yeah, we'd have to see what would happen in regards to that. But unfortunately, and it is very unfortunate to say this, I don't think Daniel Ricciardo will be on the grid after this season, because his performances in the last few months just have not been anywhere near good enough. And given some of the young talent out there and how good the grid is now, I just don't think there'll be really any places for him to fill. Again, the only places on the grid I can think of is maybe a Haas or a Sauber. Other than that, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe you could say Williams, but I think that would really depend on if Williams were properly a midfield team, not, touring around at the back of the field. But yeah, I think Ricciardo, after this year, sadly, is done in Formula 1. Now let's get on to Fernando Alonso. And yeah, pretty simple for Alonso. Obviously, he's joining Aston Martin for next year. What I think will happen is Aston Martin will get better next year, slightly, and then probably the year after. They'll start making steps up. There is no doubt about it. Aston Martin will start to improve. But because Fernando Alonso is impatient, and I don't think he'll want to wait around for 4 or 5 years for Aston Martin to become a front-running title-contending team, I think Fernando Alonso will retire at the end of 2024. And like I said earlier, I think his replacement at Aston Martin will be Carlos Sainz, who will be with Aston Martin probably for the rest of the 2020s decade. If he's going to stay on the grid past 2024, really, Fernando does need, or let's go back to that clip again of Fernando. Yeah, Fernando really does need Aston Martin's progress to be a bit quicker than even they expect. Because if they, let's say Aston Martin, because obviously currently they're quite far down in the Constructors' Championship, if by the end of 2024 they're in a position where Alpine are now, which is 4th in the championship, I just don't see how Alonso would want to, keep waiting around and stick around, hoping that they become a front-running team. So they're going to have to make a bit more progress and start really, to bridge that gap between themselves and the front-running teams. But, that's just what I think is going to happen. I don't think he'll want to wait around forever. But we'll go on to his teammate quickly, Esteban Ocon. For Esteban, I think he will remain at Alpine for the rest of this decade. And I know that's quite ambitious to say, him remaining at Alpine for another, 6-7 years. But I don't see where he could go, really. I mean, if Lewis Hamilton does leave Mercedes at the end of 2023, maybe he could replace him for a year or two. But I just, other than that, I don't see where he could go. And Alpine, I think, definitely until the next set of regulations in 2026, I think Alpine will be pretty much where they are now, which is an upper midfield team. So I don't think there'll be really any massive reason for Esteban to leave. Obviously, it's a French team, so they want a French driver in their car, and he is one of the most premier French drivers out there. And I think Ocon, probably for the rest of the decade, if he does stay at Alpine like I think he will, he'll grab probably a couple podiums, maybe more than that, maybe a few podiums, more so than a couple. maybe get another surprise race win, but I think Esteban Ocon will be stuck in the midfield from now on. And I think joining him at Alpine for next year and staying with him for quite a while will be this man, Pierre Gasly. I think he will join Alpine for next season, and I think Gasly will be an Alpine driver for at least 3, maybe 4 years, because again, French driver, French team, and as long as he performs well in Alpine or an upper midfield team, I don't see why Gasly would be in a desperate hurry to leave and go elsewhere unless Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull had an opening. So I think Gasly will probably stay at Alpine until 2026 or 2027, and then move maybe to another midfield team, upper midfield team in F1. Maybe, you never know, in the future could go to McLaren, especially if Piastri does leave at the end of 2024. You never know, that could happen. But I think Gasly will be in the midfield, just like I said with Esteban Ocon. I just don't think those two are going to really go anywhere higher up the grid. But let's get into a couple final drivers in this, predicting the future of Formula 1. And the penultimate driver we'll get into is quickly Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri Bottas, I think, will remain at what is currently Alfa Romeo, soon to be Sauber. And I think, I've written down that I think he'll retire at the end of 2027. It will at least be around that time, 2025 to 2027, where he'll be, I'm not sure how old he'll be, but he'll be in his late 30s, I think, by that point, Valtteri. The reason I think he'll still be at that team is because he's still a good driver, consistent driver, still, when the car's good, pretty quick in qualifying. And with Audi probably coming on board in 2026, I think he'll probably want to stay around for that. So that's why I think he'll retire at the end of 2027. And I do think he will be joined by Théo Pourchaire at the Sauber team for 2024 onwards, replacing Zhou Guanyu, who I think just sadly won't do well enough to continue on the Formula 1 grid. But Valtteri Bottas, I think, will just stay in the midfield now, and he'll retire, like I said, in a few years' time. Finally, though, I just want to quickly go on to Mick Schumacher, because in regards to Ferrari, like I said earlier, I think it'll be Leclerc and Sainz leaving the Ferrari team. I just said a few moments ago that I think Oscar Piastri will replace one of them and be the number one on the team. And I think the number 2 or the other driver in that team will be Mick Schumacher. The reason is because Mick, I think, is I think he is a good driver. I think he is good enough for F1. I think he just needs more time, really, does Mick, in Formula 1. And I think he will eventually get to a point, say in 2024, where he is proving that he is definitely good enough for a move up the field. And I think from a PR standpoint and a money-making standpoint, I do think Ferrari are pretty desperate to get him in their car, because obviously it is Michael Schumacher's son. So I think it will be Oscar Piastri and Mick Schumacher racing for the Ferrari team from 2025 on. After that, who knows who drives for Ferrari, but to be honest, I haven't given who's going to be driving for the Ferrari team as much thought as to, say, the Red Bull and Mercedes teams. And the reason being is because no matter who drives for Ferrari, they're not going to win a championship, because the problems at Ferrari are deeper than just the drivers. They've had so many great drivers in the last few years, but as a team, they've just ruined their chances consistently. I guess I haven't really talked about who replaces Sergio Perez at Red Bull at the end of 2026. The reason I didn't talk about this was mainly because I think it will be someone who's not on the grid yet, or probably not even in F3 or F2 yet. Because obviously the end of 2026, when he's, that's what I said would be the time when he would leave the Red Bull team. That is still quite a way away, that time. So yeah, I think it'll probably be whoever replaces him. I think he'll be someone who is not currently, obviously, on the Formula 1 grid, but probably not on the F2, F3, or maybe even F4 grid, to be honest. But whoever that replacement is, it will definitely be a bit worse than Max Verstappen. It's not going to be a driver that can, regularly compete with Max Verstappen and challenge him, because I don't see why Red Bull would go for a equal status between the two drivers at Red Bull as long as Max Verstappen is at that team. But guys, let me know in the comments section of this video, what do you think of my predictions? And let me know your predictions for the drivers that I went through. The drivers I went through was what? Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, Hamilton, Russell, Norris, Piastri, Ricciardo, Alonso, Ocon, Gasly, Bottas, and Mick Schumacher, I think it was, that I all went through. Yeah, let me know in the comment section what you thought of my predictions for all of those drivers. And let me know what your thoughts are for those drivers and the teams as well going into the next few years in Formula 1. But guys, until my next video, has been me, Shazza HD. Goodbye. And there you go, guys. That is the end of that topic. That was quite a long one. 45 minutes nearly, that topic. And as well, apologies if the stream fucked up a bit. I noticed for about 30 seconds or so, I started to drop frames. I dropped about 500 frames for about 30 seconds or so. So again, apologies about that, but it was, totally unexpected. Might have just been my internet dropping out for like a second or two or something like that that caused that to happen. But let me know, guys, in the live chat, what do you think of my predictions? Do you agree, disagree? And just let me know what you think will happen for those certain drivers in the next few years. Let me know in the live chat. And if you are new to the channel, just want to say, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because we will be covering in full the Singapore Grand Prix next weekend and the Japanese Grand Prix the weekend after. As well, guys, really make sure to stick around to the end of the stream, because I do have an update in regards to my schedule for those two Grand Prix. Well, actually, I'm just trying to think. Actually, no, hold off on that. I was initially going to announce a change to the schedule, but yeah, I need to think about it some more because of, again, those strikes I was talking about at my local college where I'm doing my uni work. That might change things around again. So yeah, we'll see when it comes to that. But yeah, if you are new to the channel, again, don't forget to subscribe for more content. Bottom right of the screen, you do it right there. And for everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash that like button. Of course, does help the channel grow. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. I'm just going to quickly, though, guys, remove all of those clips and pictures or graphics and that. So just give me a couple minutes and then I'll get onto your comments in the live chat. Yeah, let me just get through all of this. I've had a very busy day, I've got to say, because all of this stuff that you saw, I set up from about 10 a.m. this morning up until about 15 minutes before the stream started. So yeah, I've had a very busy day getting all this set up. And yeah, bit of a shame I couldn't get into the teams more so, but I think I pretty much laid out how I think the teams will do in the next few years or so, to be honest. But yeah, let me just quickly delete these final few. And the reason I'm doing this is because obviously we did have the stream drop for a few seconds. If I do this, delete them all, then that will make the stream run quicker. So that's why I like to do this. And hold on. There you go. And back to that. So, like I said, guys, let me know in the chat what you think of what I had to say and give me your own predictions for these certain drivers and their Formula 1 futures. And if you're wondering, if you weren't able to catch the the bulk of that topic that I just did, or even any of it, then don't worry, because it will be uploaded on the channel probably 2 or 3 days after the Japanese Grand Prix, so in about 2.5 weeks' time. So yeah, don't worry about that. It will be uploaded onto the channel. But yeah, let's get back to the chat. Let's see what you guys have to say. Josiah, Merck and Red Bull contenders, Ferrari to remain washed. William says, sleep time in Australia. I'll listen for as long as I can. Chaz, listen to try. And then says, listen to the rest tomorrow. Again, no problem about that. That's absolutely no problem. I understand. Vladimir Rodriguez says, morning, Chaz, at 9:20 here in Mexico. And yep, Dane, I will talk about the Latifi news. Don't worry about that. Thanks, Blade, for that comment. Saying good luck with your course, Chaz. Thanks for that. Right, so let's get into your comments in regards to what I had to say. Paul James Squibbs says, or asks, do you think Lewis will get that elusive 8th World Championship? Well, obviously, that's before I said he would. So yeah, I do think he will. Or do you think it's more likely that Max will be the first to reach 8 world titles? No. Like I said, I think Lewis will get the 8th world title next year. But it is intriguing to think about Max Verstappen. Will he get to 7 or 8 world championships? Like I predicted, I think he'll end this decade with 5. It's going to be, I mean, to get to 7 or 8 world championships, you have to have like an absolutely incredible career and also be a bit fortunate in, you know, that the teams you race for have consistently great cars to fight for championships. I mean, look at Michael Schumacher. He, I know quite a few years before his world titles at Ferrari, the cars he was driving were definitely not good or great cars, I guess you could say. But, you know, when he finally started to rattle off those championships at Ferrari, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th, those Ferrari cars were incredibly quick compared to the rest of the field. And even the Benetton in 94 and 95 was a very, very fast car. So, yeah. You do need, you know, the talent of a Hamilton, Schumacher, Senna, but you also do need that a bit of luck of being consistently in amazing cars for 95% of your career. Will Chan says, Leclerc has to think about himself. True. And like I said, I think he needs to leave Ferrari if he wants to win a world championship. And if there is an opportunity present at Mercedes, or if by then McLaren are a title-winning team possibly, or a title-contending team, or even Aston Martin, he's got to make the jump, because all he'll be at Ferrari is another great driver who didn't win a world championship. That's all he'll be. Which is sad to say, because, you know, if you sign for Ferrari, your expectation immediately as a driver is championships, but that just isn't what happens at Ferrari anymore. Astro Steva, have I missed a prediction for Ricciardo or Piastri's future? No, I think that comment you posted it quite a few minutes before I got into that. Vince says, why would Ferrari not want the Drivers' Championship or the Constructors? Could it be more advantageous to be 2nd or 3rd? I'm not quite sure 100% what you mean by that. If you're, I mean, obviously they're going to finish, you know, at best 2nd this year because it's over pretty much. What do you call it? With with Ferrari? You know, because they're not going to win the championship. I mean, it would, I guess, be more advantageous to finish 3rd, because then they would get a slight bit more development time next year in the wind tunnel. But considering the fact that Ferrari don't really tend to improve their car as a season goes on, would that really make a difference, them having like 5-10% more wind tunnel time? I mean, in the past, when they've had unlimited access to their wind tunnel, they've not really got any better. So I don't see how they would get much better with a slight bit more wind tunnel time than other teams. I just don't see how they would. I mean, if Red Bull or Mercedes had that extra wind tunnel time that Mercedes will probably have for next year, then yeah, it'd be an advantage for those teams because they have got properly good personnel. But I don't see how for Ferrari it would be. Will F1 says Hamilton won't get an 8th title. Astro Steve says hardcore Danny Rick fan here, softcore Lewis one kinder, I guess. That kind of sounds wrong. No, I know what you mean by that. Don't worry about it. Quite interesting with Piastri. Josiah says, if you listen to what Lewis has been saying, I don't think Lewis will retire until 2026. To be honest, I don't think anyone knows when he's going to retire. And the thing is, I know he said, I want to continue a few more years. Just because he said that does not mean that's what's going to happen. I mean, look at Nico Rosberg. There was no indication he was going to retire from F1, and then boom, retires from F1. Same with Sebastian Vettel even. There was no real indication that he was going to retire either, and then boom, retirement. So when Lewis Hamilton retires, it will come out the blue. It's not going to be like a heavily rumored thing, and then yeah, it'll be officially announced. Like with Michael Schumacher in 2006, if you go back and look at the news cycle that year, it was heavily rumored throughout the entire year that Michael was going to retire, and then officially announced it at the conclusion of the Italian Grand Prix. That he obviously won that day in the Ferrari from the Tifosi. It could go maybe that way, but most F1 retirements tend to be just out of the blue and you don't really get an indication. And most of what drivers say when it comes to retirement and that, you shouldn't really pay attention to because most of it turns out to be bullshit anyway. So, yeah. And to be honest, a lot of drivers, when they're speaking to the media, they're just playing the game in terms of what they say. They're not, going to just come out and say exactly what they think, which, we hope they would, but that's not necessarily going to happen. Astro Steve versus Piastri has put himself under a huge amount of pressure in a team that's provided some pretty rubbish cars. If he doesn't get some early impact, he may find himself in serious trouble. Yeah, that is possible. If he does struggle like Ricciardo did, I think Piastri could be in trouble. I think that's possible. I don't think he would end up off the grid. I think he'd probably end up falling down the grid, maybe to a Haas or a Williams, to be honest. But yeah, I think Piastri, honestly, and I know Ricciardo's had a great career, but I think Piastri has more talent than Ricciardo does, or did when Ricciardo came into F1 in 2011, 2012. So I think this is probably Australia's biggest prospect since Mark Webber, I guess you could say. In terms of, single-seater drivers or just racing drivers in general. So, yeah, I think Piastri will be a good F1 driver. Will Piastri ever win a championship? Probably not. But he will. I think he'll definitely win races in his career. And if he has the career path that I said he will, going from McLaren then to Ferrari, then he'll win some races in his career, that's for sure. Josiah says Lewis has stated in interviews when given the scenario of retiring like Nico that he would never retire after winning a title. He said that he would want to give someone the chance to take it from him. Again, I think and this goes for life really. you should pay attention to people's actions rather than their words. To be honest, and I just think, in terms of what the drivers say, I don't think you can read that much into it. To be honest, I mean, look at what Fernando Alonso was telling Alpine, that he wasn't going anywhere and he was staying with Alpine, and then, you know, all of a sudden he's signed for Aston Martin. So, yeah. And even when Lewis, back in 2012, when he was with McLaren, he didn't really give any indication with his words. I don't remember at the time. He didn't really give any indication at the time, to my knowledge, that he was going to leave McLaren, but then he did. So, again, what drivers say, you shouldn't really pay that much attention to be honest, in regards to like moving to other teams or retirement, because it doesn't always tend to be correct, to be honest. Let's look for some other comments here. Ostro Steel says, bold to make these predictions at all. I predict some surprises. I hope and predict Daniel isn't finished yet. Yeah, it is. I've definitely put my neck out on the line. That is for sure. But I think in terms of the top teams, if Lewis Hamilton does win an 8th championship next year and then retires, then I think it will play out like I said, mostly. But if Lewis doesn't retire until like 2026, then yeah, a lot of it won't be correct. But that's what predictions are at the end of the day. I'm not saying it's absolutely going to happen, but that's what I think will happen. We'll see. We'll see. Jane, why did you not mention K-Mag? He was pretty good this year, especially the first race, and he's good. Especially 2018, 2016. The reason is because I don't think there's really anything interesting to say about like his future. I think he will be at Haas probably for another 3-4 years and then probably just retire from F1, or not even retire, just leave F1 and go race in WEC or maybe even IndyCar. There's nothing really interesting to say. I mean, it's the same thing about this man on screen, Lance Stroll. The reason I didn't talk about Lance Stroll was because we already know his future. He's going to stay at Aston Martin for another million years, and that's it. So yeah, that's why I didn't really want to get into those drivers, because I don't think there's really anything interesting for those drivers coming up in the future, to be honest. Ottomeyer Parker says, so many rule changes, I don't see anyone breaking the current records. Rooksfoot says, Chaz, I think you underestimate Norris. Consistent and great quality pace for the cars he's had, and a big team will go for him if drivers leave or retire, even if they have to buy out his McLaren contract. I mean, there's teams in the paddock that definitely rate him, that's for sure, but let's say it plays out how I said. So Hamilton retires at the end of 2023, and they have De Vries or Ocon as a temporary replacement for 2024, say. They will want to, replace Hamilton with a driver of not quite his exact level, but in the range of where he is currently on the grid. And the only two drivers I can think of is Norris and Leclerc. But because Leclerc's contract ends a year earlier, that gives him the advantage to get into that seat a year earlier than Norris. And the problem with Norris is, yes, he has had so many great performances, but he hasn't had a front-running car and hasn't been in a position like Leclerc's been, say, for this season in 2019, where Leclerc has proven how good he is, fighting consistently for race wins, pole positions, and that. I mean, I know Leclerc only has 5 race wins still, but he has 17 pole positions in his career. And, even though he has 5 race wins, he probably should have had at least double that. That Ferrari screwed him over on, say, what races, say, Spain and Monaco this year. Those are a couple races. Obviously, Hungary was another one. Silverstone. So, yeah, Leclerc really should be on about 9, 10, maybe 11, 12 wins at the minute. And I just think with Leclerc, again, if it plays out like I said, and with Leclerc having his contract come up to its end sooner, I think they'll go with him, because I think as well, not just because his contract comes up at a sooner point, but because they already know how good he is in front-running cars and fighting for race wins consistently, which Lando Norris, unfortunately, has not been in that position yet. He's more of a safer bet than Lando is, I think. I mean, if they were to go for Norris over Leclerc, it wouldn't be a terrible decision. And even if if Norris wasn't as good as Leclerc, or turned out not to be as good as Leclerc, it's only going to be a small difference, because they're very close to each other, Leclerc and Norris, on pace and just how good they both are. But I just think they would go with Leclerc, to be honest. But yeah, that's my opinion. And like I said, I think Norris will be at McLaren for the rest of this decade, and I think he'll be stuck in the midfield. Not because he's not good enough to be a front-running driver. He is. But there isn't enough seats available at the top three, teams. But also there's not enough teams that can fight at the front. I mean, if you go back like 10 years ago, in 2012, we had Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, Lotus, and Mercedes. Now, imagine at the minute we had 5 teams who could fight for podiums and race wins. Then it wouldn't be so much of an issue for Lando. But yeah, it just is at the minute, because we have a bit of a monopoly in F1 in terms of who the front-running teams are. And if you look at, really, since 2016, the front 3 teams in F1 have been Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull. Not in that order, but it's been those 3 teams every single season, except for, 2020? Maybe bits of 2021 as well, but since 2016, it's been those 3 teams. So those are the 3 teams you need to be signing for if you want to be in at least a consistent race-winning car. Anyway, let's find some other comments here. Good to see you, Nib, in chat. God, the porn bot's been here a couple times. And yeah, I think we've got through all the comments there. But I think what we'll do now is we'll move on to the other bits of news on the that we've had the last couple of weeks. Not every news story we've had so far since the Italian Grand Prix, but we will get into some bits of news. So we'll start with the new 2023 calendar. So let's get into that now. And it is a record-breaking calendar, 24 races long. And it's going to be a very long season. Season starts 2 weeks earlier and finishes, I think, a week later than this season. Maybe 2 weeks later. I can't remember exactly. We'll get through it, though, with this calendar. So the first 12 races are on the left-hand side, and then the rest are on the right-hand side. So as you can see on the left-hand side, Bahrain, first Grand Prix, first weekend of March, 2 weeks earlier, the start, than it was this season. This season, I think the first race was on the 17th, 18th, and 19th, I think it was, March. So yeah, 2 weeks earlier. That means pre-season testing will be end of February in Bahrain. Maybe even we'll get live testing in the middle of February, which would be great to get the season started a bit earlier with especially content for me on this channel. And then 2 week break, and then Saudi Arabia. And then another 2 week break, and then the Australian Grand Prix, another 2 week break, and the Chinese Grand Prix. I'm still not 100% sure we're going to have a Chinese Grand Prix, but it's looking a lot more likely now than it was like 3-4 months ago. But yeah, we'll see basically on that. Baku then at the end of April, and then a week later, Miami. Don't ask me why they've done that in terms of the logistics. I don't understand why you'd have Baku and Miami as a back-to-back. Then, from the 19th of May all the way to the 4th of June, we have a triple header of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, then Monaco, then Spain. In regards to, because I did mention this on the stream, in regards to me possibly going to the Spanish Grand Prix, yeah, we'll see on that. It does depend on quite a few things, but yeah, we'll see in regards to whether I actually go or not. And then a couple of weeks later, Canadian Grand Prix. A couple of weeks after that, Austria. Then a week after that, the British Grand Prix. And then, if I just pull this a bit further over so you can see the left hand or the right hand side of the calendar now as we go through the remaining races. Then at the end of July, you have Hungary and then Spa. At the end of July. What's funny is that they've put the Belgian Grand Prix as the same weekend as the 24-hour Spa race, so I'm not sure how that's going to work. But, well, if it does happen that weekend, there'll be plenty of rubber down on the track for the drivers, the F1 drivers on the race on Sunday. But, yeah, that's what it is, the calendar. And then, first race back from the summer break will be the Dutch Grand Prix. A week later, it'll be the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, and then a back-to-back Singapore and Japan. 2 weeks after that, the second ever Qatar Grand Prix at I think the same circuit we went to in 2021. They were supposed to, I'm pretty sure, build a new circuit for that, but they must have just given up. Or maybe they don't have the money for it, I'm not sure. And then we have a triple header towards end of October, start of November. USA in US Grand Prix in Austin, Mexican Grand Prix, obviously Mexico City, and then Brazilian Grand Prix in Sao Paulo. And then the final two races there, which is a back-to-back, Las Vegas and Abu Dhabi. So that is your F1 calendar for 2023. Instead of just looking at it and, just reading out what it is, let me just give some quick thoughts on it. Because you may remember that, what do you call it? That you may remember that, I think, was it Stefano Domenicali came out and said that they want to make the races, in terms of where on the calendar they put them, they want to make it a bit more sustainable by grouping races by region a bit closer, together rather than being stretched out. But looking at this calendar, they clearly don't give a fuck about that, which, I mean, I didn't think they did anyway, because I don't think Liberty Media, Stefano Domenicali, F1, FOM, I don't think any of them give a fuck about what they actually preach, the whole equality stuff, and the sustainable stuff. I don't think they care, really. I think all they care about is money, to be honest. Looking at the start of the season, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, why is it not a back-to-back? I don't get it. Why not just have Bahrain, push it back a week and then have Bahrain, Saudi Arabia as a back-to-back? I don't get why you wouldn't do that. Doesn't make any sense to have a break, a 2-week break in between races. Those two races, I just don't get that at all. And then Australia, China. To be honest, I would probably have that as a back-to-back as well, considering, it is in that part of the world, the far east part of the world. So I guess I would probably try for that, but I think it's still fine, really, having a 2-week break in between those two races, because it is still a bit of a distance between China and Australia. But, if they wanted to make it a bit more sustainable, then I wouldn't have exactly been too disappointed had they gone for a back-to-back there. But then, as we see with round 5 and round 6, Baku and Miami, a back-to-back. I just don't get it. I really do not understand. Why not have why not have Baku and Imola as a back-to-back? Because at least Baku is what I will admit my geography is not great. Isn't Baku? I don't think the whole of that city is in Europe, is it? I think isn't part of it in Asia, or is it Azerbaijan that part of it is in Asia? I can't remember exactly, but I think it's still pretty much European. That Grand Prix. I mean, it was the European Grand Prix in 2016, so yeah. So why not have Baku and Imola as a back-to-back, then have Spain and Monaco as a back-to-back, and then Canada and Miami as a back-to-back? Why not? I mean, all you have to do is push the Miami Grand Prix back a month. It's not going to make a massive difference, is it? I mean, yeah, it will probably be a bit hotter and maybe a bit too tough for the cars if it's held in June rather than May, but in terms of holding the races in a more sustainable way, why not have a Canada-Miami back-to-back or Miami-Canada? I don't understand why that can't be attempted. So yeah, that's what I would do, is go for Baku, Imola back-to-back, Spain, Monaco back-to-back, and then Miami, Canada back-to-back. And then for the rest of the calendar, for the rest of the summer, it's fine. Austria, Silverstone back-to-back, and then Hungary, Spa, Holland and Italy, and Singapore and Japan. That's all fine. That's absolutely fine. And then Qatar Grand Prix. Just why is it there? Why is it in that slot in between Japan and USA? Why can't it be the penultimate race of the season? I don't understand why. I understand Abu Dhabi has, I think, the rights to the final race with their contract, but why can't we have Qatar and then Abu Dhabi as the last two races? I mean, it worked well from a sustainable point of view, having, Qatar, Saudi, and then Abu Dhabi, the final three races of 2021. I don't get why we can't do Qatar and then Saudi, or Qatar and then Abu Dhabi as the final two races. I mean, you could even argue that we should do Qatar at the start of the season, maybe do a triple header to start the season. Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and then Qatar. Again, that placement of that race does not make any sense to me, given the races around it. You go from Asia then to the Middle East, which I know is not an absolutely massive distance, compared to going from then the Middle East to North America, but it just doesn't geographically make sense in my view. And then with the triple header, USA, Mexico, Brazil, even though Brazil is, it's not absolutely miles away compared to USA and Mexico, there's definitely worse races you can go to geographically in terms of travel. But why not have Las Vegas as the third part of that triple header? Why Brazil? Again, it doesn't make any sense. Unless Las Vegas has, in its contract that they have to be the penultimate race of the season. I don't get it. I just do not understand why. Again, it's just proof that they don't, what's that saying? They don't do what they preach, or something like that. They don't actually care about the stuff they're talking about. They just, put them on the calendar wherever they can fit it, basically. Which is basically how the F1 calendar has worked in history. Just, you fit it wherever you can. Obviously, you try and fit it in certain months where not too hot or too cold. That's pretty much what this calendar is. But again, from a logistics or sustainability point of view, this calendar does not really make much sense to me, except for the middle of the season. The start of the season and the end of the season, I just don't get the placing of certain Grand Prix, especially that Qatar Grand Prix. That makes no sense to me why they'd place it there. But also, this calendar, 24 races, that is just too much for me. The calendar should be no more, in my view, than 20 races. 20 races per season is, for me, what an F1 calendar should be. So half the races in Europe, because it is a European championship at the end of the day. That's where the beating heart of Formula One is. So half of the races, 10 races in Europe, and then we should have the other 10 in all the other continents. North America, South America, Africa, Asia, Oceania, all those continents, Middle East. Yeah, that's how it should work in my view. 10 races in Europe, and then the other 10 in other continents. That is, for me, the ideal calendar. Now, when it comes to picking the ideal races for the calendar, that's another discussion, isn't it? I mean, what 10 races would you pick to be the 10 from Europe? That debate goes on for at least an hour, to be honest. But yeah, it is too many races. I mean, even though I don't, go to the races, I'm not a team member, I don't travel to every single Grand Prix like a lot of the team members do and everything, and it's very stressful and tiring for them. Even for me, covering these races on this channel, once we get towards the end of the season, it is very tiring and stressful. And yeah, just 24 races, it's a lot. It really is a lot. I mean, there's 5 races from the start of March until the end of April. That's a lot of races to have in that time period. Even, and 3 races pretty much in the month of March. I mean, going from March into April with the final race there, in that month in Australia. So yeah, it's, we will try. That's all I can say. We will try and cover it for you next year. The only thing I'm happy about with this calendar is that the season starts 2 weeks sooner, and then testing will start, at least 2 weeks sooner. That's the only thing I am happy about when it comes to this calendar. Everything else, it's just, it's not great. Not great at all. But let me know in the chat what you think of that. Astro Steve says Turkey is half Asia, half Europe. Azerbaijan technically Europeanish, but really in Asia. But then Europe is a peninsula of Asia. So yeah, for me it would just make more sense if it was Baku and then Imola, or Baku and then Spain as a back-to-back. But Baku and Miami, yeah, it doesn't make any sense really to me. Astro Steve says, if they cared about anything other than money, Saudi Arabia wouldn't be on there at all. Exactly. Yeah, I've said it a million times before. They don't care about what they actually talk about. And that's why I said earlier, and this isn't really in regards to Lewis Hamilton, because I think Lewis Hamilton is a much better person than the people running F1, Liberty Media and that. But do not pay attention to what people say. Pay attention to their actions. Their actions show you who they really are. Stefano Domenicali does not believe in the shit he says. He does not believe in it at all. All he's there to do is make more money for Liberty Media. That is it. He is not there to be making a Formula One this socially inclusive, more inclusive thing, and make it more equal, diverse, all of that. He does not believe in that at all. The only reason he says that, and Liberty have said that in the past, is purely for PR, nothing more, and for marketing campaigns. They don't actually care about these things, and they never will. The only thing they care about is making money, which obviously making money is very important for running a business. I'm not criticizing them for trying to make money, but you can do both at the same time. You can make money and also, do what they actually say that they are trying or want to do, to be honest. But yeah, that's that. And the final, I guess, couple things we'll get into is a couple driver confirmations. I'll quickly just say that, yeah, Colton Herta, if you guys didn't hear, is not going to be on the grid next year because he doesn't have a super license. And what do you call it? What was I going to say? He doesn't have a super license, and he has not been granted an exemption, just to let you guys know. in regards to that. So yeah, that's a shame for him because it would have been interesting to see, how he would have done given the opportunity at Alpha Tauri. But talking of Alpha Tauri, they have confirmed one of their seats for 2023. I mean, technically, they have confirmed both seats, but with Pierre Gasly still probably going to Alpine, we think, that's not looking likely that he's going to stay, at Alpha Tauri. But anyway, let's quickly show this on screen. And yeah, this is from Alpha Tauri on the 22nd of September, which was Thursday, announcing that he is staying for 2023. And yeah, Yuki Tsunoda staying at the team. Not a surprise. He's done well enough to stay. Hasn't had a great season, but it's been solid. I think that's all we can really say about that. And I'll quickly find the other driver confirmation news. And then we'll get to the final little topic I want to get into. Let me just see if I can find it quickly. Here we are. And yeah, Williams and Nicholas Latifi. Williams announcing that they will part ways at the end of the season, and they want to thank Nicky for his commitment and hard work for the last 3 years and wish him all the best in the next steps of his career. And yeah, Latifi just hasn't been good enough. I don't think Latifi's been as bad as people think. I don't think he's not like Nikita Mazepin levels of bad. We've had many drivers who've been worse than Latifi, in my view. And given his teammate for the majority of his time at Williams was George Russell, who I think will be a multiple world champion in Formula 1, and towards the end of that time at Williams, he was getting pretty close to Russell on pace. I think Latifi, I didn't think he did that bad, honestly. I thought he did, given his talent, I thought he did the best he could, really, at Williams. It was a shame, obviously, what happened with him, getting all those death threats from Hamilton fans after the Abu Dhabi debacle and all of that. But yeah, not really a surprise that he's, leaving Williams, because I think we can say that this year he's definitely just not been good enough. And after what happened at Monza, where he was destroyed by Nick De Vries in his first ever Grand Prix, who finished in 9th, and Latifi finished in, 15th or 16th? Yeah, that was the final nail in the coffin. No doubt about that. Even though probably the decision to get rid of Latifi was probably made before then anyway. But the next thing we're going to get onto is to do with Williams. And it's to do with Alex Albon. Let me just find the statement that they released in regards to Alex Albon. I'll have to scroll for a bit to find it. Let me just see if I can find. It was the day after the Italian Grand Prix, I think. Yep, here it is. And yeah, let me just show this on screen. So this was a statement from Williams the day after the Italian Grand Prix, September the 12th. And so, if you remember, Alex Albon missed that weekend because of appendicitis, and that's why Nick De Vries got his drive. But then, unfortunately, his condition for Alex worsened quite a bit. This is what the statement had to say. Further to Alex Albon's diagnosis of appendicitis on the morning of Saturday, 10th of September, he was admitted to San Gerardo Hospital for treatment. He underwent a successful laparoscopic surgery on Saturday lunchtime. Quite a quick surgery, given that he, I think, was transferred to hospital. Was it the night before or that morning? I can't remember exactly. This is where it gets scary. Following surgery, Alex suffered with unexpected post-operative anesthetic complications, which led to respiratory failure, a known but uncommon complication. He was re-intubated and transferred to intensive care for support. He made excellent progress overnight and was able to be removed from mechanical ventilation yesterday morning. That was Sunday morning. And he has now been transferred to a general ward and is expected to return home tomorrow. He has now returned home and physically is apparently fine and is now working to being back for the Singapore Grand Prix. But yeah, we almost lost Albon there. Respiratory failure. If you guys don't know what that is, that's of course you stop breathing. That's what that is. And then he was put on a ventilator for assisted breathing, and then took off it once he made enough progress, which is good to see. Obviously, he's a very fit person, so he's not going to be a person like him on a ventilator for long, having something like that. But yeah, very scary news this was. Thank God he's okay, and I hope we see him in Singapore. But to be honest, given how the Singapore Grand Prix is physically, I don't think Williams should risk it. I think they should wait till the Japanese Grand Prix. Because Singapore, there's drivers who lose 4 or 5 kilos in that race alone. It is a monster of a Grand Prix. So I would not be risking Alex in that race. So De Vries might race in Singapore, we'll have to see. I mean, I hope Alex does race, because it was a shame at Monza he missed that Grand Prix, because he probably would have finished in like 7th or 8th place. The Williams car was so quick that weekend at Monza, but yeah, we'll see what happens with Singapore. But good that Alex is, alive and okay, and seems to be physically okay going into hopefully his return in Singapore. We'll have to see what happens in regards to that. Yeah, that was a massive surprise the day after. What do you call it? The day after the Italian Grand Prix. It was an absolutely massive surprise, that. Now Latifi's pants. Come on. I don't want to say he's not. I don't want to say he's pants, because we've had worse drivers. Come on, he's better than Mazepin. Obviously, we had Roberto Merri, Will Stevens. I think he's better than those drivers. I don't want to hear people being like, "Oh, Will the lad Stevens, he was so great." He wasn't. He was not he was a good driver, but I don't think he was I don't think he was as good as Latifi. I think people forget Latifi was a pretty decent F2 driver, and he raced in F2 in 2018 and 2019. And I think he won like 3 or 4 races, did Latifi. Let me look. I remember he was in that 2018 season where you had Russell, Norris, and Albon in F2. So Formula 3, the European Formula 3 series, he had a best finish of only 10th. Not great. And then GP2, his results weren't great, but then he finished 2nd in the GP2 Championship in 2019, and he won 4 races, and then he won a race at Spa in 2018, and finished 5th in 2017. So he's, I'd say he's a good driver. He just isn't good enough for the Formula 1 level. The thing is, when obviously Will Stevens, Roberto Merri, when they were on the grid, the quality of the grid then was so much worse than it is now. The quality of the grid now is so good. It's the best it's ever been, in my view. If his teammate wasn't Aitken, he wouldn't have won Grand Prix. Probably, yeah, but he did well with what he was given. That's all that matters at the end of the day. And I think, he did a decent job for Williams. And didn't he? And I've got to say, when I say this, I obviously don't mean this in like a way that that I think Latifi is better than this driver. But didn't Latifi beat Russell in the championship last year? And in 2020? Wasn't that a thing? Let me look. He beat him in the championship in 2020. I know that because he finished 11th in a race. I'm pretty sure that happened. Let me look. Oh, no, he didn't. He actually finished below him. Oh, that's because Russell finished 9th in a Mercedes. Well, that's not fair, is it, really? On Nicholas. I mean, if Nicholas was in that Mercedes, he obviously would have won the race by a lap and had the fastest lap, so... 2021? No, he was just beaten by how many points? Russell finished 2nd, didn't he? That's why. Still, Latifi did well. I mean, he beat Giovinazzi in the championship in 2021. And, yeah, the Alfa Romeo was much quicker. Even Kubica finished ahead. Exactly. Maybe Russell isn't as good as I actually think. But yeah, that's really the main bit of news we've had in F1 since the Italian Grand Prix. Astro Stebo asks, do you think Jack Aitken should/will get an F1 drive? No, too much time has passed, unfortunately, and I don't think he is good enough to get on the grid. He's a good driver. There's no doubt about it. He's a good driver. I wouldn't mind seeing him in like IndyCar or something like that, just to see like what his level is. But yeah, he's a good driver. But he's what, 27 now? I just saw when I was scrolling the Williams Twitter, because he is a reserve driver, I think, for Williams, that he's now 27. Yeah, too much time. I think it's passed. And I say that, you know, with him, and people will say, oh, but what about Nick De Vries? He's 27. But De Vries has, you know, been doing stuff in Formula E. Jack Aitken hasn't done anything for the last 2 years, I don't think. So, or has he in Formula E? Let me check. I don't watch Formula E because it's, in my view, absolute shit. So let me check. Has he raced? Was he racing currently in Formula 2? Oh no, he was last year. Yeah, he was last year. He did a few races. See, I'm pretty sure, has he not raced in Formula E before? I'm pretty sure he did. Or I must have just been imagining that. Yeah, must have been. He's 3rd in ADAC GT Masters at the minute. And 7th in the European Le Mans series. So he's doing like he's doing endurance racing. And then last year he was doing endurance racing and a few F2 races. He hasn't really done like proper single-seater stuff since 2020, so yeah. I don't think he's got a chance really. Yeah. I know, De Vries is 27, I know. But it looks like, as well, that's one thing I forgot to mention, apparently, De Vries is on course to be joining Alpha Tauri next season. He's had talks with Helmut Marko, and looks as though De Vries, I don't think Red Bull could really get anyone else to replace Gasly, because I don't think Red Bull are opposed to letting Gasly go to Alpine. They just want to find someone who's an adequate replacement. And I think especially after what Nick did in his first ever Grand Prix, yeah, I think there'll be a fine replacement. So yeah, I think it looks likely that it'll be De Vries Alpha Tauri, which will be good to see. But I think, guys, I'm probably going to come now to the end of this stream. Thank you guys, obviously, for coming along to this stream. I just want to let you guys know quickly, though, what the schedule is going forward into next week and the week after. Because, obviously, next weekend is the Singapore Grand Prix, and the weekend after is the Japanese Grand Prix. Now, again, like I said earlier, if you didn't know already, I'm currently at university. I'm not going to a proper university. I'm doing my work at a college, but college staff where I'm at and just in the UK are going on strike next week, I think. So that might alter my schedule for the Singapore Grand Prix in terms of Thursday and Friday. So yeah, we'll see when it comes to that. So I'll let you guys know, obviously, on Thursday, this Thursday coming, on Thursday morning, I'll let you know the official schedule for the channel in terms of what content I'm going to be doing for the Singapore Grand Prix. If the strikes for my college are going ahead, then I will probably do the same schedule as always. You know, Thursday preview, Friday qualifying preview, Saturday, you know, qualifying long stream for a few hours, and then Sunday for a few hours as well. But if I am in uni on Tuesday and Wednesday, which is the days that I am in, what I'm probably going to do is have a day off on Thursday just to, you know, to rest and get ready for the Singapore Grand Prix. And then what I'm going to do is probably do a practice 1, practice 2 watch along on the Friday, a qualifying preview later that Friday, and then do my usual content for Saturday and Sunday. Again, though, I don't know the situation yet, so I will let you guys know on Thursday morning what the official plan is for content on the channel. As well, there is a video coming out tomorrow. There is a video coming out tomorrow night, I think there is. Yeah, there is. There's a video coming out tomorrow night that I recorded as a part of my stream from last week, which is about how Red Bull outdeveloped Ferrari in 2022 and were able to turn the tide in their favour. That video about tomorrow at 6 PM UK time, so make sure to go and check that out tomorrow. And as well, there's a couple of videos in the description of this video that I uploaded this week about how Silverstone is ripping off their F1 fans and how, or maybe, you know, has Sergio Perez been treated unfairly by the Red Bull team. The two links to those two videos are in the description down below, so make sure to go and check that out. But yeah, when it comes to Singapore Grand Prix and even the Japanese Grand Prix, because it looks as though the strikes are continuing in terms of university and college staff, probably for the next 3-4 weeks. Yeah, I'll let you guys know the plan of action for the Grand Prix weekends coming up on those Thursday mornings, you know, before the actual Grand Prix weekend gets underway. But yeah, that's the plan going for next week. Monday, there'll be a video. Tuesday and Wednesday, nothing. And then at the minute, it'll be the usual Thursday stream, Friday stream, Saturday long stream, Sunday long stream for the Grand Prix in Singapore. And I cannot wait for us to be back, you know, with Formula One, the Singapore Grand Prix. Only 6 races to go now in the season, so it's not going to be long until the end of the Formula One season. But yeah, I'll let you guys know the plan in terms of the exact timings and all of that of the streams. I'll let you know on Thursday morning. But if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Whoever watching right now, if you have not already, don't forget to smash that like button. And as well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. Check out my latest videos on the channel. And don't forget as well to check out my Discord server, link below in the description for that as well. But cheers, guys, for the stream. And until my video tomorrow, going through how Red Bull outdeveloped Ferrari in 2022, and the Singapore Grand Prix content coming up next weekend, starting Thursday, Friday next week. Until then, guys, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.